Hey guys, today we are reviewing the WP32 McCake wavetable board from Serdaco. And this might be just the ultimate wavetable board, not only compatible with General MIDI, but also with the mighty Roland MT-32. Full disclosure, Serdaco sent me this product for free. It's a review sample. I'm not getting paid. I do get to keep it, and everything you see in this video are my own opinions. This product has a ton of features. I did my best to break it down in a logical sequence. Let's start with the very basics. What is a wavetable board? Here we have two typical ISA sound cards that you would find in a retro DOS gaming PC. You will usually find a large audio chip on the sound card. This one here has chips from ESS. And this sound card has a chip from Yamaha. Both of these chips use a technology called frequency modulation, in short FM synthesis. Let's listen to a few DOS games, what this sounds like. Now coming back to the wavetable module, we can see here there are a couple of pins at the top, and this is a header to connect such a wavetable module. On the other card we can see the same thing. It also has a header for a wavetable board. Here we have two examples of such wavetable boards. This one is the Dream Blaster S2 and this one a more high-end product, the Dream Blaster X2. And then all you had to do was line up the wavetable board with the header and just push it down like so. Let's do it again with this card and the Dream Blaster X2. Just line it up, push it down, and off we go. Wavetable boards do not use FM synthesis. They use real recordings of instruments, and that's why they sound much better. So let's listen to the same DOS games, but now with the Dream Blaster X2 wavetable module. So basically by installing a wavetable board on your sound card, you could upgrade the sound experience, and many of your DOS games sounded a lot nicer. In terms of timeline, these wavetable boards started to appear around 1992, which was the same time of the introduction of the Sound Blaster 16 from Creative Labs. The McCake is also a wavetable board, but it is a brand new development. It's powered by a Raspberry Pi mini computer. We've got an SD card reader, there's an OLED screen, buttons, and really it can do a lot more than a regular wavetable board. Specifically, the McCake supports two main MIDI standards. The first one is General MIDI and the second one is the Roland MT-32. The Roland MT-32 came before General MIDI from around 1987 into the early 1990s, and then around 1992 games started to support General MIDI. So let's dig a little bit deeper. What the heck is this Roland MT-32 and why should you care? The story of the Roland MT-32 started with the Roland D50 synthesizer. This is what it looks like, and it launched in 1987, and what it brought to the table was combining what traditional synthesizers at the time could do with PCM sample-based waveforms. The Roland MT-32 was based on the technology of the D50 synthesizer, but of course a much cut down version for a lower price. And this Roland MT-32 became supported by many DOS games, and the big reason is the company called Sierra. Sierra became famous for making graphical adventure games like King's Quest, Space Quest, and Police Quest. Their games were known to push the technical limitations of graphics and sound, and they would also sell through their catalogs sound devices. For example, here we've got the Adlib ISA music card, and down here we can see the Roland MT-32. Here they're writing that the Roland MT-32 is capable of producing perhaps the best sound you've ever heard, and it will take you millions of miles away from your computer. This experience had a steep price. We can see here the Ad-Lib card cost only $175 US, but the Roland MT-32 you're looking at $550 US, and that's without some of the other accessories you needed to actually connect it to your computer. So in short, Roland MT-32 gives you really nice music in old DOS games. I mean, these are games now over 30 years old, so let's listen to some of these games and what they sound like on the McCake. To make matters more confusing, there are different versions of the Roland MT-32. This Roland service manual gives us a clue. It mentions a MT-32 new and old, and we can see here that the old version does not have a headphone port at the back, whereas the new one does. So that's a very easy way to distinguish those two units. And in 1989, the PC magazine reported about a new device called the CM32L, which will have additional sound effects but lacking the external controls of the MT-32. This is what the CM32L looks like from the front, and here we can see a diagram with all the ports at the back. The CM32L was specifically targeted at computer users, and the extra sound effects, well, many games took advantage of it. Here we have a really good example with Elite Plus on the CM32L. We hear some sound effects, but if you have a regular MT-32, you don't get these sounds at all. Gods is another good example. You will hear some sound effects on the Roland MT-32, but they don't match really what's on the screen. So again, I have a recording here showing you what the game sounds like on the MT-32 and then correctly on the CM32L. And if you want to go down the rabbit hole of all the different MIDI devices from Roland, I have a 3-hour video tutorial for you. This is actually one of my very first videos on my YouTube channel. To help you figure out which device you need for what game, well, Vogon's wiki has a list of MT-32 compatible computer games. Down here we have a list of names and some notes, and here we can see if you want to have a MT-32 old, new, or a CM32L. If you were to purchase all these MIDI devices in real hardware, you need 3 MIDI devices, and with the prices on eBay and availability, well, good luck. It will cost you a fortune. And the beauty with the McCake is that, yeah, it does it all. Just push the button, change the ROM set, and off you go. At this point, you might be wondering, well, how do I switch between all these modes? We will go over how to use the McCake in detail very shortly, but briefly, there are a couple of ways. Firstly, on the device, we have buttons and a screen. Secondly, for MS-DOS, we can use software to send commands to the McCake to switch between the different modes. And as a separate purchase, you can buy drive bay devices, which has the screen and the buttons at the front. They come in 2 sizes, 3.5 inch, 5.25 inch, and also in different colors. And on the SD card, we can configure the default mode. So if you turn on the computer, let's say you want a specific General MIDI SoundFont loaded, you can do that, but you can also define the Roland CM32L to be the default device. There is one final aspect that we need to talk about. Connecting the Roland MT-32 to your computer, you needed a MIDI interface card. Here we have some examples. This is the Roland MPU 401AT. Then we've got the Roland MPU IPC-T. This is what it looks like. And very hard to obtain is this version here for the IBM micro channel. All these MIDI adapters are impossible to find and very expensive. This document here has some technical specifications about the Roland MPU 401 MIDI interface, and specifically there is the acknowledge of command feature that intelligent mode MIDI adapters support. And if you're using a regular Sound Blaster or ESS sound card, then the game will wait for the acknowledge of command message to be returned, but it never arrives, and then the game will be stuck, appearing to be frozen. Wing Commander is a good example, and Space Quest 3. This requirement for intelligent mode will affect you if you're using a regular sound card like this one with the Wavetable header. We can use a program called SoftMPU, and this program will give us intelligent mode support for regular sound cards. This works really well. Games like Wing Commander or Space Quest 3 will now work on a regular sound card. The downside is the performance. Games, they send MIDI data at the beginning to the MT-32, and with SoftMPU this will take much longer compared to if you have a real intelligent mode compatible MIDI adapter. So using SoftMPU, it will give you intelligent mode support on regular sound cards like this one at the cost of longer loading times when you launch your games. There's another issue, especially for those of you using a Sound Blaster 16. Many of these cards have buggy MIDI ports with hanging notes. So all in all, using a regular sound card like this is not the best way to enjoy Roland MT-32 and General MIDI music. If you are looking for a MIDI interface that is intelligent mode compatible and works really good with the McCake, I have 2 recommendations for you. One is the Pico Gus and the other one is the PC MIDI MPU card. The Pico Gus is what I've been using in this video to capture all the game music. It's an ISA sound card based on a Raspberry Pi Pico, and that's why the price is a little bit lower. And it can do the Gravis Ultrasound, Sound Blaster with FM, the CMS Game Blaster. It can do Tandy 3 voice and Intelligent Mode MPU 401. And Serdaco will do a bundle. I will talk about the prices in more detail later, but if you're interested in picking up the Pico Gus and the McCake, you get a small discount and you're also saving on combined shipping. And this is what the McCake looks like installed on the Pico Gus. One note for the interrupt: most games will work with the default interrupt of 5, but if you're building a machine for maximum Roland MT-32 compatibility, let's say a 286 or 386 machine, you wanna use this setting here, interrupt 2/9. Some games will specifically look for that interrupt. And the second recommendation is the PCI MIDI ISA interface card, also fully intelligent mode compatible. This one does everything 100% in hardware, so it doesn't use a Raspberry Pi with emulation. So on some machines, this could work a little bit better for you. And in terms of pricing, you're looking at 110 euros, including shipping for this one. To configure your games for the Roland MT-32, often there's a setup or installation program where you need to make sure the sound option is set to Roland MT-32. Sometimes games have a command parameter. In this example, we have to launch the Monkey Island 2 game with the R parameter. So let's move on from the Roland MT-32. To summarize, it saw support in games from around 1987, 1988 to the early 1990s. And then a new standard emerged, and that standard is called General MIDI. The General MIDI standard defined 128 instruments, starting with instrument number 1, which is a piano, all the way to some sound effects here, and instrument 128, which is a gunshot. So this standard allowed other manufacturers, not just Roland, to now make their own MIDI devices in the form of wavetable boards. Here we are in the PC Player magazine from October of 1994, and yeah, it's a roundup of wavetable modules, and seemingly every company that was associated with music in one way or another produced a wavetable board. In this roundup, they tested modules from Creative Labs, Aztec, Teratech, and Roland. Here we are in the setup of Doom, and when we choose a music device, well, we can see here now General MIDI, and Roland MT-32 as an option has disappeared. Descent is another game. At the top we can see copyright 1994, and if we change the music card again, we can see General MIDI being offered, but the Roland MT-32 is not an option anymore. The McCake wavetable board is also compatible with General MIDI. It is powered by a software synthesizer called Fluid Synth, and that runs on the Raspberry Pi. And through the SD card, we can load SoundFonts in the SF2 file format. You can think of each sound font as being a separate wavetable board, sounding slightly different. Some are very small with highly compressed samples, whereas others are huge, 400, 500 megabytes, and sound much nicer. The McCake has 1 gigabyte of RAM, so even very large sound fonts are supported. I have a recording here of Privateer with a range of different SF2 sound fonts to give you an idea of how different they can sound. So which General MIDI sound font should you go for? The General User GS sound font that comes shipped with the McCake is already pretty decent and a very good start. If you enjoy trying out different sound fonts, you can head to the Internet Archive and download a collection of 500 different sound fonts. I spoke to my patrons about what sound font they recommend, and this one came up from Trevor. It is the SC55 sound font. It's got a project page which I like, and you can download the latest version right here. And now we're gonna listen to a bunch of games with Trevor's SC55 sound font and what they sound like on the McCake. So to summarize things so far, the McCake supports the Roland MT-32 with all the versions, the old, the new and the CM32L, and it's compatible with General MIDI, supporting the loading of SF2 sound fonts. And now I will fire up my retro PC and I will show you how you use the McCake. Here's a closer look at the unit. This is the Wavetable header to connect to your sound card. SD card slot over there. This is the Berg connector. It does require external power. 4 buttons, 2 for volume, one to toggle between MT-32 and General MIDI mode, and another one to toggle between the different MT-32 ROM sets and the SF2 sound font files. This is the Raspberry Pi mini computer OLED screen to see what's going on, and this here is to connect a front panel drive bay device for easy navigation. Let's connect everything up. We have our sound card with the Wavetable board header here, and then we take the McCake and we carefully line up the header, making sure that we're not bending anything, and then we're pushing it down just like that. Now we do require external power, so there's a Berg connector on this side, so just plug that in, and then the other end goes to your power supply. And if you have purchased a front bay drive bay device, it comes with a connector here, and just make sure you get the polarity right, that pin 1 lines up with pin 1 on the front bay device, and then plug that in, and there you go. Our McCake is now ready for some testing. Here we can see what's on the SD card, and for the Roland MT-32 we need to copy and paste some ROM files. So these files will give you the ROM options for the MT-32, the old version, the new version, and also for the CM32L. In the SoundFonts directory there is already one General MIDI sound font that we can use, but I have a lot more that I want to play with. So yeah, all the SF2 sound fonts that you want to try, just paste them into this directory. The files, the software that you are seeing on the SD card are part of the MT-32 Pi project by Dale Winham. Behind the scenes, I've been working with Serdaco to test the latest version with the McCake. We had to adjust a few configuration files to support the OLED screen, the buttons, and the DAC that's on the McCake, but everything is working now. So if you purchase the McCake now, you will get the very latest version, and if you fancy upgrading to it, you can also download the latest version from the Serdaco website. And finally, we just have a quick look into this MT-32 Pi configuration file. The config file has a lot of options. We only need a few to get going. This one here defines, when you turn on the computer, will it load up a MT-32 or a sound font for General MIDI. You just specify here which one you prefer. Further down in the config file we have the MT-32 emulator options, and here we can specify, when you turn on the computer, which ROM set will it use. So we can choose between the MT-32 old, the new version, or the CM32L. And again, if you, for example, want it to start up in 32L mode, you just make that change. And under the sound font synthesizer options, we can define which SF2 sound font gets loaded by default. All the files are gonna get alphabetically sorted and then applied an index from 0 to 255, and then you need to figure out the index of the file you want. By default, it will pick the very first one. There are two more advanced options that I do want to point out. Under audio, if we scroll down, is an option here to reverse the stereo. This can be quite important. Some sound cards have the Wavetable audio reversed. The ESS audio drive, for example, that I have is such a card, as well as the Yamaha YMF. And in the community there are hardware modifications floating around where you need to cut traces and do some soldering. You can avoid this with the McCake by just changing this setting here. And under LCD is an option that I used to help me do this video. You can rotate the display, so flip it upside down. That helped me film the section where I'm showing you how to use the buttons and the screen directly on the device. And maybe you want to flip around the drive bay device, have the buttons on the right side, so you just make the change here. There are 4 buttons here, and here we have a little screen. This button here toggles between MT32 mode and sound font mode. Let's go back to MT32 mode, and then the second button will toggle between the different ROM sets. So this is the 2.07, which is the new version. Press again, we've got the CM32L, and we press again. This is version 1.07, which is the old type. Let's switch back to sound font, and then here the second button will toggle between different sound fonts. Some of them are larger and they will take a little bit longer to load. Let's go for this one. You wait a few seconds and then you will get an indicator that the sound font is being loaded. We can see it right here, so that will take a moment depending on how fast your SD card is, I suppose. And once the loading is finished, you're good to go to use it in a game. And then we have 2 more buttons here. They configure the volume. The display will also show MT32 messages and MIDI activity information. I will show that with the drive bay. It's a little bit easier to film. And this is the front bay device, available in 2 sizes, 3.5 inch and 5.25 inch, and different colors. So the same 4 buttons as on the unit. This one toggles between sound font mode and MT32 mode. Once in MT32 mode, we can toggle here the ROM set. So let's say I want to go for the MT32 old. These 2 buttons change volume, and let's switch back to sound font, and let's choose a sound font file. Let's go for this one. Wait a few seconds to confirm that we want this sound font loaded. It's now loading the sound font, and here we go, ready to play some games. I'm now loading the game Doom. Here we can see the activity of all the MIDI channels. And this is Space Quest 3. Sierra took advantage of the display in the Roland MT-32, leaving us little display messages. And now we're in the game, the music is playing, and we can see the display is showing all sorts of interesting information. We can control the McCake with the MT32 control software. We scroll down and click on the release here. And then down below here we can see a zip file for MS-DOS. So download that onto your DOS retro PC. Here we are in MS-DOS on our retro PC, and MT32 lets us send commands to the McCake to specify the behavior. The main commands are -M to switch to MT32 mode, -G to switch to General MIDI or the sound font mode, -B you can change the MT32 ROM set, Alt, New and CM32L, and with -S and the index number you can choose which SF2 General MIDI sound font you want to load. Let's try a few commands. Firstly, let's switch to MT32 mode. And now let's change the ROM set. Let's say we want to have the CM32L. It's as easy as that. And now let's say I finished playing Monkey Island 2 and I want to play Doom with General MIDI. So I just go -G and the McCake is now in General MIDI sound font mode. And to set the sound font, you do have to know the index number of your sound font. Let's go with number 5 and off you go. Also useful are these commands to send MIDI resets to the device. This command is also of interest if your stereo happens to be swapped, and with this command here you can reboot the Raspberry Pi. Let's check out prices. As always, these are subject to change and current at the time of doing this video. 114 euros for the McCake, ready to run, fully assembled with the computer module for Lite, the OLED screen and a 32GB SD card, the software pre-installed, ready to go. You can save 2 euros by going with a smaller SD card, and if you're a little bit of the maker type and you've already got a computer module for Lite, you can save actually quite a lot. You're looking at 62 euros with the OLED screen, and if you don't need the OLED screen, maybe you're happy with just using the DOS commands, only 55 euros. But be aware, it has to be the computer module 4L. There is more information down here, specifying exactly which models are compatible. If in doubt, best to reach out to Serdaco to avoid disappointment. And then we have a few upgrade options. We get to the panels in a short bit. The power cable. So this converts from the Molex power to 2 Berg connectors. You might need one of those. So that's another €5. And then we've got options for 3.5-inch drive panels in beige and in black, looking at €29. Or for the 5.25-inch, there are 3 options. You're looking at €45. If we scroll down, there are photos of what they look like. These are the 3.5-inch drive bays, and here we've got the 5.25-inch drive bays. And if you're interested in purchasing both the McCake and also the Pico Gus, then there is a bundle price. You're looking at €170 for everything that you need to get going. So guys, there was a lot to talk about. This really is a complex device in terms of supporting a wide range of MIDI devices, and many years of DOS games are supported with this device. But it's really easy to use once you've set it up. Just 2 buttons to control everything. We would all love to own all these individual MIDI devices, but firstly, financially, well, good luck trying to find them, and then you have to pay a fortune. Prices on eBay are quite extreme. And then you have to wire everything up, a MIDI switcher, an audio switcher, cable spaghetti. It is quite a complex task. So if you have a retro PC with a sound card and you've been playing games with the FM sound, then yes, I can highly recommend you upgrading to the McCake. If you have a Wavetable header on your sound card, you will experience games in a new light with fantastic sounding music. Even games over 30 years old will sound absolutely amazing. And if you factor in the prices of what it costs to buy these MIDI devices in real hardware, well, I think this is a bargain. So guys, there you have it. That was my take on the McCake Wavetable board from Serdaco. Huge thumbs up. I can highly recommend it. If you have a DOS retro gaming PC or you know someone, this would be a nice purchase, maybe for Christmas or something like that. Now, if you have a McCake, I would love to hear from you. What is your favorite sound font? What games are you into? And if you have any questions, please leave them down below. And that's it for this one. Thank you so much for watching. I shall see you soon with another one.